Assalamu alaikum. Greetings to all the people out there. It's been a while since I have graced Speaker's Corner with my august presence. Nevertheless, I have been asked to come back by popular demand, something that I'm still considering. For now, I'll just say a few short words in terms of remembering the brothers who used to be here before lockdown and who are not here with us today, and we would like to remember them with a certain amount of reverence and with some fond longing, because we had some good brothers like Brother Isa Frimpong and others, and Brother Haj Sar from Senegal, another good brother used to be down here. He and I used to do a lot of work in this park in the 1980s and the 1990s. He's no longer with us. So I just want to give a shout out to people and acknowledge the contributions of those that came before. Go back further into the past, Brother Harun, Roy Saw, Chief David, all these people who are no longer here. The park has changed. Now, the next time I come, perhaps we might talk a little bit about Priti Patel and the Rwanda adventure, as I will call it, because the brother asked me to speak about it, and the few words I will say by way of introduction is that no one will come out of this enterprise looking good. Everyone involved in this, whether we are talking about Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda or prime minister of Rwanda, his wife Janet Kagame, the first lady of Rwanda, whether we're speaking about Priti Patel, we know who she is, sadly, or whether we're talking about Boris Johnson, we also sadly know who he is, whoever we are talking about, but mostly the unfortunate people that are being called refugees, who have no way of applying legitimately and formally. There are no legal channels through which they can apply to come to this country. So whenever they arrive here, they are automatically turned illegal. And we have to open that, the very legality or illegality of that underlying proposition to discussion before we discuss cart loading a bunch of people into the heart of the continent of Africa to languish in a black hole. And when I say that, I know people are already going to have their hackles raised. I do not mean Rwanda is a black hole. I have spent months in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. I visited Gihozi, the genocide memorial. I visited Nyamata, the church where people were massacred and incinerated. I visited Nyamirambo, the Muslim quarter of the capital of Kigali. I know the city well. I also happen to know the Prime Minister or President, Paul Kagame, and Janet well enough to know that there is more to this story than it seems. But I think that is enough of a taster. Oh, one last thing. I happen to be fortunate enough and placed in the right moment in time to attend a number of meetings hosted by the High Church of England. The High Church of the Anglican Church is the branch that recognizes the authority of the Pope. Most Anglicans don't. But they were fundraising strenuously and lobbying on behalf of their English influence in Rwanda, long before this refugee question was raised. So what we have had since the French have fallen into disfavor and the Belgians due to some alleged complicity in the Rwandese genocide in the early 90s, what we have had is a shifting of powers in the region. And just as you see, Mozambique has become, albeit a former Portuguese colony, a member of the British Commonwealth, so too Rwanda has removed the French from favor, as it were, and in their place, the British have occupied that vacuum of European or Western influence in Rwanda. And that is at the basis of the relationship between Britain and Rwanda, between Priti Patel and Paul Kagame of Rwanda. That is the basis of the relationship. It is a relationship where the British are hoping to extend their sphere of influence, capitalizing on the disfavor into which the French have fallen since the Rwandese genocide. Now, as you already know, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, spent most of his years in exile in Anglophone Africa, partly in Uganda, mostly in Kenya, and so his wife. And if you go to Rwanda today and try to speak in what was once the official language, French, no one will reply to you. They much prefer, of course, their first language, Kinyarwanda. Then they also speak Kiswahili, but they will prefer English over French. It is a testimony to the influence of the English language and culture supplanting French influence. And as you know, the French were never the colonizers of Rwanda. They became de facto a power that filled a vacuum when the Belgians gave the country independence. But remember, it was the French-speaking part of Belgium that was in control, not the Vlaams-speaking, but the French-speaking part of Belgium. So that influence with the French language between Belgium and France was there in Rwanda. And as we also know, historically, there were two attempted genocides against the Tutsi. There was one in 1959 and one in 1961. And then the latest one with which we are most familiar in the early 1990s. So this thing has deep roots, and the relationship between the Tutsi and the Hutu have always been fraught. The European colonizers exacerbated pre-existing tensions and divisions. To pretend that they are the sole source of the divisions in Rwanda is inaccurate. The Rwandese have always been divided between Hutu as the majority, the farmers and sedentarists, and the Tutsi, the cattle-keeping people, as the overlords, as a tiny minority. It is the same in Burundi next door. It is the same in southwestern Uganda, where the capital of the Ankole people, the Ankole or the Banyankore or the Bahima, are basically the Ugandan equivalent of the Rwandese Tutsi and the Burundian Tutsi. It's the same people with a slight different inflection in language. And their capital in Uganda is in Mbarara, in the southwestern part of the country. But all of those kingdoms came to that region, settled there. They've been integrated among the populations for very long. But they have always existed in the capacity as minority overlords in Rwanda and in Burundi. So we have to look at all of these factors when we look at, no one is justifying a genocide, but what has happened was, once the Belgians decided to vacate and give them independence, they created a situation where they appeared to favor the majority Tutsi, the majority Hutu, who are the farming people. By favoring these people, they created conditions for unrest. As I said, there were two attempted genocides which caused a lot of dispersal out of the country of the Batutsi population into neighboring countries, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. Following which, people like Paul Kagame, the current president or prime minister or leader of Rwanda, grew up in exile as an English speaker, apart from Kiswahili and Kikuyu or whatever else they spoke out there. He was once closely a protege of Museveni in Uganda. So their relationship is close. And the relationship of these people, in terms of what they have been doing in the Eastern Congo, needs to be looked at. When we think about refugees being sent from England to Rwanda, you have to look at the relationship of the Rwandese RPF chasing the Interahamwe throughout the Eastern Congo. You have to look at that relationship and whether they are really mopping up the remnants of the genocidaires, the genociders, or whether they are stealing the wealth of the Eastern Congo measured in terms of coltan, cobalt, and copper. I will leave this at this point, and the next time we convene, we will bring this history up to the very act of the first decision made recently to deport principally Afghan refugees to Rwanda, and why, in my opinion, it is unjust, it is inhumane, and almost illegal to do so. But for now, I will stop here and wish you all a pleasant rest of your Sunday evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Blessings. Peace out.